What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon 466 Cards, and today we're going to compare TCG and its card market to the basketball card market and the baseball card market. A few weeks ago, I was listening to the Sports Cards and Nonsense podcast where they were talking about how TCG was really driving the volumes being sent to PSA for grading. And as you can see, I'm on the IG of GemRate 2022 cards graded. TCG leading the way with 3.4 million, basketball second at 2.5, baseball at 2.2. So a pretty noticeable difference there. And there was also a broader discussion about sales volume among these three different categories. So that's what we're going to look into today. We're going to look at sales volume, and we're going to start off with grading. This obviously is 2022, but what are the pop reports at PSA overall, not just 2022, but since the beginning of time, basically, since grading first came onto the scene in the late 90s. So I went to the PSA pop count part of their website, psacard.com/pop. You can see that here. They have it broken down by every single section here. And so if you go to the TCG website, you can see they have 9 million cards graded since they were first launched in 1988, which is very different than baseball, because baseball goes back to the 1800s, and as a result, they have 22 million cards in their pop count, which is different than basketball, which goes back to only 1948 and has roughly 10 million. So 10 million versus 21 million versus 9 million. They're not quite the same, but again, a lot more history in baseball, and hence the bigger difference, and just a little bit more history. Still, actually, quite a bit more history in basketball, just not as to the effect or to the extent of baseball. And so that made me think, well, what if we normalize it? What if we just look at 1988 onwards? What do the pop counts look like? And so I copied it into Excel. You can see here, baseball, 9.6 million in the pop count since 1988. 9.6 million, compares quite well to 9 million for TCG. So that was interesting to me. I would have expected to be much larger in baseball, and it makes me think, was there a junk wax in basketball, or TCG as well? I don't know. You tell me. If you know in the comments, let me know. In basketball, 1988 onwards, it's 8.5 million, which again lines quite very similarly to TCG, 9 million here, 8.5 there for basketball. So the way I'm looking at this is in terms of the number of slabs out there from 1988 early 90s onwards, it's roughly the same size. TCG is basically like another baseball or basketball in terms of the number of slabs out there. But is that actually the case for sales? And so I went to the eBay sales history part of their site and looked at just all the sales that they've had, and I'm looking at individual cards. I'm not looking at wax. I'm not looking at lots. I'm not looking at sets. And I was shocked to see this 2.75 million number in terms of the number of sales in eBay's history, which I believe is 3 months. I would have expected this number to be one less decimal place. Like maybe around, like 800,000, maybe 500,000. This kind of blew me away. What is baseball's numbers? I would have expected baseball to be at least double TCG. It's not 4.7 million to 2.7 million. But the other thing is, we're not comparing apples to apples, right? If we want to do a fair comparison, 1988 onwards, we'd have to strip out all the sales from before 1988 when TCG first came onto the scene. That's what I've done in this next tab. 3.4 million. You can see here for the seasons, I've clicked on 1988 and onwards. So it's actually a very similar number, 3.4 million to 2.7 million. 2.75, so like roughly 20-25% more in baseball. Again, that's very comparable. Was not expecting that at all. If we look at basketball, so again, TCG was 2.75. Basketball actually has less in terms of the number of cards sold in the same period. 1.8 million. I was very thrown off by this, but maybe it's because I'm biased by being more involved in basketball and its popularity, and also just how many cards that existed now and since like 2018, 2019 was not the case in the early 2000s, and so that probably biases my thoughts on this. And again, this is all basketball cards, so we're not even doing the apples to apples comparison of 1988 onwards, right? So when we do that, and that's this here, it's 1.7 million, so pretty much the same thing. But again, it shows that TCG is huge. It's basically just a little bit smaller than baseball in terms of transactions, and it's much larger than basketball in terms of the number of the volume of transactions, which is I just was not expecting. A good what 50% ish bigger than basketball in terms of the number of transactions. The one thing I would love to see is the dollar amounts, but I don't have the capacity to do that. It would require building a code with APIs, and my desire to do that or even try to do that is very close to zero. And so I'll leave that for someone more equipped and more motivated to do it than me. But the way I take all of this is that TCG, if you account for the fact that it started off in 1988 onwards, it's roughly the size of a baseball or basketball, give or take a little bit. And that's not what I would have expected. But perhaps that's also not what you expected, or maybe you did. I don't know. I'm not a TCG guy, so you let me know what your thoughts are on this comparison, whether or not some of the numbers I showed here today surprises you or not. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments. That's the video for today. Let me say once again, thank you for listening and watching. I will talk to you all soon. Cheers.